Perfect. Hopefully, start sharing my screen there as well. Perfect. Lovely. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah,
Yes.
perfect. And I'll just present that there. Lovely. Great. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. We are really excited about this webinar. It's something that's been on my mind, local food hubs for quite a while. So I'm really excited that we have some great speakers with us with some experience running food hubs, and hopefully there's some things that we might be able to learn that we can apply to Argyll and Bute. So yes, sorry, my name's Brenna. I didn't introduce myself. And I'm one of the project officers for the Argyll and Bute Climate Action Network. I'm here with myself and my colleague, Kate, this evening. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself there, Kate. Just give a wave. Lovely.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Kate. I also work with ABCAN as well, with Benna on mainly sustainable food stuff.
Yeah, so I'll just give a quick agenda before we get into everything. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the work we've been doing around developing a food partnership for Argyll and Bute. And Kate's going to talk a little bit about some of these in-person events that we've been running for the past few months. And which is why this webinar sort of came about. So we'll just give a bit of context around that. And then we have Mandy Ketchin from Food Lochaber, which is a food hub that's been running for 2 years. I had that right, Mandy? About 2 years?
6 years.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Don't diminish your hard work. 6 years. So Mandy's going to talk us through about some of the experience with Food Lochaber, and they're based up in Fort William. And then we have Gail Emo from the Galway Food Hub here to talk about their experience running a fairly successful, from my point of view, very successful food hub for the past few years as well. And then we have Jill Bowis, who was involved in running the Open Food Hub. It is no longer running, unfortunately, but we thought it'd be great to get some perspective on what happened there and some learnings that we might be able to take away and apply to some potential new food hubs. And then the last bit of the webinar is just going to be Q&A and discussion with all of our lovely speakers. We just left, we're just going to be doing questions at the end. We just thought there might be questions that are be applicable to everyone that's speaking. So if there are things that come up and you want to put them in the chat, we'll just answer them all together at the end if that's okay. Great. So myself and Kate have been working on developing a food partnership for Argyll and Bute for the past year and a half. Well, myself for a year and Kate for a year and a half. And when we say that, it's about becoming a food partnership, designated food partnership under sustainable food places. Which, as you can see, has a big gap where Argyll and Bute is at the moment. So we're trying to rectify that. Um, Basically, what we mean when we talk about a food partnership is trying to form a cross-sector partnership with all different folks from within the food system. So whether it's public agencies and local authorities and health boards and community organizations and businesses and all sorts, so we can kind of get diverse views on what a sort of holistic food system would look like. Just trying to make sure that everyone's working together to identify what the priorities are for our region. So that's what we've been trying to work on and getting those folks all in the room together. And to just give a little bit of sort of policy context around that, some of you may know that the Good Food Nation Act was enacted in 2022, which set out a vision for Scotland as a good food nation where everyone takes pride and pleasure in the food that they produce, cook, serve, and eat. So this spurred on the Scotland's first National Good Food Nation Plan, which basically mandates Scottish ministers, local authorities, and health boards to come up with a Good Food Nation plan for their area. So there was a consultation last year, ended in April of 2024, where people could comment on the draft Good Food Nation plan and go over the objectives and just make their public comments. We didn't hear anything for a little while after that closed, but we now have the proposed Good Food Nation plan as of June this year. So that's been laid before Parliament, and they'll be looking at it this month, and hopefully we'll have some sort of movement on it within the next couple months. And yeah, so it's been a bit of a slow process, but we're finally getting somewhere. So we know that this is sort of coming down the line. So we're trying to do a little bit of the legwork that's involved in getting all those sort of actors in the room together. And just bring people together to talk about the food system, because we know that this policy is going to be coming down the line very shortly. So that just gives a little bit of context for some of the work. But I'm just going to pass on to Kate to talk about some of the in-person events that we've been doing over the past couple of months around this as well.
Yeah, thanks, Brenna. Yeah, so here we were kind of asking people what they wanted. We'd done some online events. And we were also hearing from people that they'd really like to have more in-person stuff and actually gathering with other people and thinking about and learning about our food systems. So that's where we came up with the idea for these Food for Thought events, conversations across Argyll and Bute. And that was basically just about bringing people together, building connections between us getting to know people and giving everybody a chance to have a voice about the future of food in our communities and to lay the groundwork for a sustainable food partnership for our region. So in February, we held the first event in Glendaruel in Bute and Cowell, and in March we had one in Oban. We're also planning events for Helensburgh, Lomond and Mackay, but they've been a bit held up because everybody got super busy over the summer. So we're looking to October and November for those events. So the ones that we've had so far, we've showed the film Rooted, which is a great film highlighting some brilliant work in Dumfries and Galloway on local food systems and regenerative farming made by Propagate. And that sparked conversation we then had a panel discussion with local food experts. We had a shared meal with local caterers, and then an afternoon visioning session exploring our views and desires for the food system. So what came through from those discussions and visioning sessions was really consistent, that people are concerned about access to the land, affordability of good food for everybody, and the need for stronger networks. And some priorities for the future really stood out as well. There were commonalities in the discussions in each area, but in Bute and Cowell, the major standouts were conversation about a local or mobile abattoir, preventing the need to travel to Paisley for them, improving access to land for new and small-scale growers, exploring options for community food hubs, which they've not tried in that area, and alternative economic models like bartering co-ops and surplus distribution. And in Oban, the main themes that people were talking about was a desire to reinstate and strengthen a community-owned food hub, which had been happening but has stopped, which we'll hear a bit about later on. Increased access to land for local growing and particularly food and farming education. So these events gave us a really strong sense of the challenges, but also the opportunities for building a fairer, more connected food system here in Argyll and Bute. And they also gave us ideas for what to do for the future, and hence we decided to do a series of online webinars based around the themes that came up. So hence this one of the major themes for both areas was exploring food hubs. So hence this one, and then we're also going to be having some more. We're going to have in November, I'll tell a bit more about later, but a workshop with the Land Workers Alliance. Yeah, so that's kind of a background to where we're coming from and why we decided to do this webinar today. So
Lovely. Thanks, Kate.
I'll hand back to Brenna.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, so just to give a little bit of a whistle stop tour of what we've been up to for the past sort of year and a bit. But I'm gonna just pass to Mandy now to jump right in and tell us a little bit about Food Lochaber. I'll stop sharing there, Mandy.
Okay, hello. Everyone hear me?
Yes,
I'm going to share my screen. I'm also going to rattle. Whoops, my glasses are falling off. I'm going to rattle through this at speed because I think I've written much more than there is time for, but we'll see how we go. Get to here. Can you all see that okay? Hi,
yep,
everybody.
great.
While I was thinking about what to say tonight, my mind wandered into how on earth I got to be working for Food Lochaber in my mid-70s, and I thought I'd just share some very quickly formative points along my personal food timeline. Yes, discovering that you could actually make your own soup was a very formative experience when I think I was a young teenager. Lots of books sort of in the 70s and 80s, a fantastic lecture from Tim Lang, which sort of opened my horizons to the fact that there were politics of food and radical politics of food. Over a decade living on the island of Muck, where we were self-sufficient in quite a lot of things and a lot of experience there. But I mean, generally, my life has not been particularly connected with food. I've just picked out some, a few things along the way. I did, for a few years, make no money at all, but thoroughly enjoyed making homemade bread for people. And so I'm now working 3/4 of a day a week for Food Lochaber. I've been doing it for 20 months, so I keep feeling rather guilty that I still haven't got a clue what I'm doing. But if I do the calculations, it's equivalent to just 3 months there so far. So I don't feel too bad about still finding my way. So who is Food Lochaber? We're not-for-profit, part of the Lochaber Environmental Group. I don't think we could survive as a standalone organization. I'm not sure. Founded 6 years ago, hugely bolstered, I think, by the COVID years when it was a really good way for people to get food then. And our main objective is supporting and promoting local food production. And our main activity is the online food market that we do through the Open Food Network. But we also do other things. We have occasional workshops, webinars, general informal knowledge and skill share, and we loan equipment to our producers. We're in Fort William within Voluntary Action Lochaber's building. We've got one room, Leg has one room. Food Lochaber just has an occasional sort of pitch within that room. As you can see from that picture, we're surrounded by secondhand bikes and there are compost bins and all sorts of other things going on. If you can just see where my cursor is, this green framed thing here off screen is a pedal powered smoothie maker, which our bike team take round schools and things to show people sort of how power is generated and the benefits of cycling. Always dreaming of a new building for the environmental group. I do really struggle, even though we're tiny, I struggle with the limited space we have. We just have me, plus Marion as director of LEG, probably putting in a lot of voluntary sort of director work as well. Very little kit, just a hot desk, temporary desk space, one laptop, a donated fridge freezer and chest freezer, 2 tables, and some white clean tablecloths, and not much else. So it doesn't actually need much to set up a food hub. It's actually very little. And I suspect unless there's enough market to sort of have your own premises, the best thing is to piggyback in some other organization. Yes, we have a loan library of tools, a two-wheel tractor, and a livestock trailer, which Marion conveniently keeps in her own shed. Lochaber challenges. I'm going to keep feeling, I think, throughout this evening, somewhat embarrassed by how small Food Lochaber is compared to what I suspect the Galloway Food Hub is able to do, and what I'm absolutely sure any food hub in Argyll will be able to do. I try not to be apologetic for the scale of what we do, because we have huge challenges, literally shed loads more rain, hardly any soil, and the soil is pretty grim, and the demographics are very different. Much lower population, very dispersed, although I know Argyll also is. Our population tends to be much more concentrated in the sort of immediate Fort William area, but I think much less wealthy, and I'm guessing generally a much lower interest in environmental issues. So we operate our online market through the Open Food Network, which is, I only kind of discovered a few months ago just how big a network it was internationally. So we're within the UK part of it. As usual, Scotland has fairly small enterprises compared with England, but that's probably proportionate to population. And within Scotland, I'm not entirely sure whether this map is, it can't be every enterprise, because I know, we have a dozen or so enterprises sort of working with us, but I think perhaps these are the main hubs. But all kudos to Galloway, I think, because the Southwest, proportionately to population, definitely have the highest number of enterprises on the Open Food Network. So we've been growing very slowly. We're 6 years old. Our first shop cycle in 2019, only 5 producers, a total of 11 products on sale. Over 6 years, we've only managed to double our number of producers, but at least we have done that. And the number of product variants has gone up by 11 or 12 fold, something like that. So we're quite proud of that. We have regular producers who fall into a few different categories, crofters and other people sort of trying to make part of a decent living sort of as a business. We have a couple of community enterprises, which we're very pleased to have on board. We have grow your own gardeners who just supply small quantities of surplus. And we have one global company, Jahama Estates, who supply venison. The global company, for anyone who doesn't know, is the individual who owns the smelter here in Fort William, and with the smelter comes the hydro scheme and a vast swathe of land as well, because it's needed to, apparently, for the sort of water collection area for the hydro. So although it seems weird that we have an international metals trading Plutarch, or whatever the word is, in Food Lochaber, we're still pleased to be supporting all the local people who are working on their venison production. Then we have occasional producers. Stronabar was one of our founding producers. They've now expanded, running their own shop, so they only sell through us now when they've got a real glut to deal with. people who've got seasonally limited produce, airy goat herd, for example, very small scale, so they only tend to supply us once a year. Shieldfoot Organics produce quite a lot, but they're a long way away at Argyll, so they only supply us when they sort of happen to be passing on a shop day. And then we have guest producers, people who are trying it out before becoming regulars, and sometimes one-off opportunities. Then we've got actually quite a lot of potential producers, but time is limited to actually progress things with them all. But to meet, I mean, I think we're always reaffirming that the limit on growth is the number of producers, not the number of customers. And by and large, our producers sell everything that they have. So we need more producers, we need more produce, and we need a wider range of produce, because I think our experience shows that the more variety we have in any one shop cycle, the more people buy generally. And we're always encouraging grow your own people to sell their surplus through us, obviously, and more folk to start growing their own a little bit. And we're also happy to look at things, sort of non-food things, if they're connected to the food chain, or if they're making things like toiletries from homegrown herbs, anything like that. We're also a bookshop, so we published this book a few years ago. I don't know if you can read that subtext, but it's a short history of soil fertility and composting in Lochaber. So it has to be said, it's not a bestseller. We've got loads of copies in our cupboard, and so we sell those on Food Lochaber as well. How do we select our producers? I guess we're hungry for producers generally, so we're very relaxed about who we have, but we don't take anybody and everybody. We're always looking for a general fit with Food Lochaber and the environmental group's ethos. People must be either based in Lochaber or fairly close out with, unless it was particularly special, like we've stocked trees from drum fern trees on Skye. And we're not prescriptive. We don't have the luxury of saying all our producers must be organic or anything like that. We don't have the luxury of saying, for the sake of the environment, we're not going to take any meat producers. We have to be fairly relaxed about all of that. But we do encourage organic practices, maintaining soil health, recyclable packaging, all that sort of things, and any manufactured goods. I think we wouldn't take any that weren't at least in part made from locally grown things. Nobody's too small. Nobody in theory is too big, but most sizable food producers probably wouldn't find any benefit to selling through us. But our smallest producers, might sometimes just have 2 bunches of herbs in a shop cycle. There really is no minimum limit. We have a reasonable range of things. I think everything that you would expect. We can't take things that don't comply with the law, but we do help people minimize the hassle of complying with the law. I spend quite a lot of time doing that, especially with sort of grow your own people to support them. We can't take fresh meat and fish because we've got very limited sort of storage control. We take in frozen meat. We don't have any fish suppliers at the moment. I think the fish fish businesses have their own pretty successful distribution network. So all our meat is frozen. It comes in the morning and it goes out in the afternoon. So issues of temperature control are very easy for us to manage. No alcohol, obviously, and we would take some non-food things, as I mentioned before. So how do we operate? We have short shop cycles, basically just a couple of days the shop is open, sort of regularly, but varying according to the season. We have a single delivery and collection point in Fort William, and we've been looking at the viability of satellite hubs across Lochaber. We haven't yet found a good model of establishing them, but we haven't given up. We're still looking at it. We simply have a subscribed mailing list of customers who get notified when shops are opening. The producers communicate not very often between each other, just using a WhatsApp group, and we use social media and community newspapers. So the whole thing is really quite low key, but then our sales are quite low key as well. So each producer decides themselves the price that they want to receive. And I think we all accept that there's no expectation or ability to compete with the main food supply chain. Our producers need a fair price for what they have. Food Lochaber adds a markup, just as any shop would do, but that doesn't cover the whole costs of us running the market. And weirdly, we add 25% for most people, but only 10% on meat producers, which was what was agreed at the very start, because meat producers felt that if we added 25% onto their price, nobody would buy it. And I guess it means that the value of the meat we sell is much higher than the value of the fruit and veg we sell. So there's a sort of balance, but it does seem a bit tough on the fruit and veg producers. Then there's a small transaction fee per customer order, which in theory covers the card payment people's charges to us. And then the open food network charge a fee to their hubs. So it's free up to 500 sales in a month. And we are mostly well within that, say, during the winter months when we're only doing one cycle a month. Fairly modest if sales are over that. And it would be a high class problem if we got over £6,000 in a month. So we operate a 7-day cycle. This was set up long before I arrived at Food Lochaber, and I think it's designed so that the coordinator can do it by only working sort of part of 1 day a week, or typically 1 day a week, some weeks, and half a day a week, other weeks. So we set up the shop cycle. We let the producers know that the cycle's open for them to load their stock quantities. The shop opens early Monday morning, stays open till 10 o'clock at night. So on the Tuesday, so by late Tuesday, the producers know what's ordered, and they can spend Wednesday sort of harvesting their produce and preparing orders. They deliver to us on a Thursday on the morning, and the customers collect in the afternoon. So it's fairly streamlined. And I think, yeah, fairly easy for the producers to work to that cycle. We pay them quarterly simply because, so the money comes from customers into us, and then we pay the producers quarterly simply because even, the extra admin of doing it monthly would make it even harder for us to cover our costs. On the day, Food Lochaber days are completely chaotic. We're trying to run this amidst all the bike sales and the compost bin inquiries and people wandering in with all sorts of queries. We do need space for sorting. If you imagine all the varied stuff coming in and needing to sort it into the customer orders, you actually need double the space to sort it all out. There's ridiculously not much time to get anything else done during that day. There are people coming and going all the time. And every time we're running a market, I think it's ridiculously labor intensive per customer per pound. And I think if only we had scanners and barcodes and all that, and then I think, no, don't be so stupid. We wouldn't want to do that. But all sorts of little things, one producer forgets to bring the ice cream from their freezer. One customer sits down to eat her blueberry ice cream on the spot and forgets to take her eggs, and I end up having to deliver her eggs home afterwards on my way home. All sorts of things take an inordinate amount of time. But it's highly gratifying. For our tiny scale of operations, we do have an impressive array of food. All our customers, as far as I know, are very happy and generally very loyal. So our customers are lovely people. They care about all the important things. They're a tiny, tiny fraction of the Lochaber population. Absolutely tiny. And there are lots of reasons for that. And I think we can never compete if people were judging us sort of on standard economic values. But I think, what we're doing has different sorts of values. Our modes of transport, this is Emma, who's been to collect our new secondhand donated chest freezer on her e-bike and cargo trailer in the winter. And two of our producers delivering their produce. That's Carol Ann with herbs and veg, and Doey's with their bread delivery bike and trailer. Benefits to producers. You only harvest what's ordered, a quick one-stop shop for them, no trailing around doing their own deliveries, having people come to the house or manning a stall. If they double up with a journey to town, there's no travel costs. It's administratively very easy for them, and there's no commitment to keep a regular supply going. You just sell what you have. We have lots of support with marketing, legislation, labeling, etc. And it's a collaborative, supportive peer network. Customers can get with us what they can't get elsewhere in town. It's a good selection. They know where their food's coming from. They like building relationships with the producers. It's easy to order and pay. And sort of over and above a veg box, you can choose what you want rather than having the supplier's selection. Huge challenges of scale for us, but sales are up nearly 75% this year, which is very heartening. We still don't cover our costs. It's hard to upscale because we're limited by the number of producers. We have had good funding in the past, which is now ended, and it's increasingly difficult to get funding for just continuing projects rather than new ones. We are safe at the moment because of a contribution from the community leg power scheme to leg itself. So we're safe, I think, for another year at least. Legislation and standards is a huge topic. We try and maintain as light a touch as possible, but there are some things that we absolutely have to comply with. I struggle with quite a lot of the potential suppliers and the old hand ones, trying to help them make sure that everything is as it should be. lots of people forget that when you're selling online, you have to give all the information to the customer in the online description. It's not enough just to have it on the packaging of the product itself. And I'd be hugely interested in a dedicated webinar to sort of share practice about sort of how we handle legislation. And hopes and plans, lots of ideas for the future. I think that's kind of me. Probably over time, I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Don't worry. No, that's great, Mandy. Thank you so much. It's fantastic to hear about the work that you've been doing with Food Lochaber, and I think it's really interesting to hear about a food hub of, I know, different populations, but sort of like similar geographical challenges of sparsely populated area, and what might translate over for Argyll. So thank you very much for that. I see a couple of questions in the chat, but I'm just going to wait until the end if that's okay with those folks. I will pass on over to Gail now, if that's right, and I'll share my screen. I have your presentation here. Can you see that all right?
Yep.
Perfect.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I can still see you. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so my name's Gail and I work with the Galloway Food Hub. I've only been involved for about a year and a half, but the Food Hub's been going, I think, since 2022, roughly. I think that's when it was Propagate that started the original project of the Food Hub, because Propagate's really interested in developing alternative food systems and good food systems. So yeah, so I came on board about a year and a half ago. My background is retail whole food management, pretty much, except I was a manager of a community shop just up the road for almost 2 years recently. And I got out of that job because it was very stressful. Could we have the next slide, please? Yeah. Okay, so the Food Hub, we're quite different from Mandy's Food Hub. Although we started small, our geographical area, we deliver within a sort of 60-mile span of geography in Dumfries and Galloway. We have the same challenges of any sparsely populated area, which is transport. But what we do is we run 14 different collection points, and we have a huge range of volunteers who help us do this. Our turnover currently is, our gross turnover is around 84,000 a year. So we operate fortnightly. Our shop is open from like Friday midday until Tuesday midday, and then we generate all the paperwork and pack on Thursday and Friday and distribute on Friday. So it's a similar turnaround where we're going for zero waste. Everything is pre-ordered so that there's no kind of waste as much as we can help. Maybe we could have the next one. So we do have this is our website. We do have good food criteria, which our producers are meant to adhere to or aspire to. I don't know what the right word is. So some of our producers, we range from certified organic producers all the way to just garden surplus, but they don't spray type of people who sell their surplus. And we also use the platform of OFN, Open Food Network. And I must say, I was quite surprised that it appears to take almost as much time and energy to run an online shop as it does to walk in the door of a building. There's a fair bit of admin and operating an online store. We do list regularly over 1,000 variants because we have at the moment about 35 producers, and some of them are quite large businesses. And particularly the meat producers, they list a lot of variants because they weigh individual products. So that is that increases kind of what we offer. If we could have the next, yeah. We also operate at the moment a sort of 75% local equation. That's what is meant to happen. We're producer led, so we have regular producer meetings, usually on Zoom, and we try and get our producers to engage with the issues that we have of the day. The other 25%, this is where I've come in, is we supplement our local offerings with bought in organic produce from Organic North in Manchester. We order a pallet, usually about 600 or 700 pounds worth of organic produce to supplement, because our customers, we range from kind of 85 to 110 orders every cycle. So it's quite, what's the word? When I came in, I could see that there was a gap in what people might want in terms of a box of groceries. And we don't grow ginger or lemons or, particular things locally. So that's where adding in organic produce from mostly from the UK, but some of it's from Europe, Spanish sweet potatoes, and there's a market for it. We get organic mushrooms that are grown in Ireland. So it's not exactly hyper local, but I do regard it as it's helping the local produce sell, because the more we can encourage people to see it as their regular grocery shop and they can get most of what they want, I think that helps everybody. And it is quite hard to stick to the 75%, 25%, because producers have the option of not listing any particular cycle. So there's no way I can calculate the numbers of who's selling how much of that particular cycle. But we'll only know that at the end of the year, kind of what the percentage actually has been. We do sell a lot of meat. We don't sell alcohol, but I'm interested in exploring that. Only because we also sell a few non-food items like wool and cards and a few things like that, and soap. There are some body care items, but you do want to, in as much as trying to give people a full grocery box, you also want to carry items that carry a higher margin, and that's where I think the meat really helps us, because it's a higher priced item and people really seem to like meat. So they buy it in. If we could have the next slide, please. So that's just an image from the OFN website. That's of our shop. And this is just what it looks like. We made a walkthrough because our customers, the OFN website is the most affordable website to run an online shop with, but it's not the most user-friendly for either the admin side or for customers. Everyone's pretty used to really slick websites like Amazon that, are easy to use. And this is a little bit clunky. It is global. It was developed, I think, in Australia initially. So some of the language is a bit different, but it does work once people get used to it. But on our website, we've posted a how-to video of how to place an order. And this is an image from that. So that's kind of what it looks like. Maybe next slide. This is the criteria for the good food criteria that we want our producers to adhere to. It sounds like we do have more producers locally, and we've got areas that really are in food deserts as far as local or organic produce is. So we're doing particularly well in areas that have very, very little access to organic food. Like, because Sainsbury's in Newton Stewart doesn't even carry organic carrots. So, people over there are keen. Maybe we could have the next slide. So this is just a list of some of our producers. There's a second page with more producers on it. Yeah. And it's a good range. Again, we started out giving better kind of lower margins to some of the bigger producers because we really wanted them on board. And what we've done, because we do rely on some funding, but we're in a funding gap right now. And so we had to kind of really look at our charges and our margins. And so we did several tweaks, like we raised our margin to producers. We lowered the mileage cost that we pay to our volunteers because our volunteer drivers get paid the mileage that they cover when they're delivering. And we actually lowered our wages just to get through this kind of hungry period. So it's not ideal. The food industry is remarkably poorly paid, and it's got very small margins, very slim margins, and the margins are slimmest on fruit and veg. And so it's a tough market. Last Christmas we had our local Aldi's was selling a kilo of carrots for 9p as a loss leader, and it's you have to do education, I think, alongside of trying to sell this way, because people are in this kind of food landscape that they've become accustomed to that makes food should be cheap, and it's not the case. Food takes energy to produce. So yeah, and we use a lot of volunteer labor, and the way our producers get their produce to us is a very complex web of volunteers who come to do deliveries. They pick up produce on their way in, and they help us pack during the day, and then they take the orders back out. So there's this whole web, and we have a couple of collection points where then another volunteer comes and meets the first volunteer and takes orders even further afield. And as you can imagine, it takes a lot of energy to organize this. We do a lot of communication via email and WhatsApp, and every single cycle is bespoke. Like there's always a slight change in who's volunteering and who's driving that time. We try to, we can go on to the next slide. Sorry. We try to create a collection point through sort of feasibility study, seeing if people there want a delivery point. And then we ask them to sort of scare up 3 drivers who would be willing to come and pick up for their collection point. And then we have been encouraging them to work amongst themselves to kind of choose which dates they can drive for, and then cover each other if there's sickness or holiday. And that has worked pretty well, but volunteers do need support, and they do need a lot of gratitude, and it's not completely free labor in that way. We feed them a really good lunch on the Friday that they've come to work, and we also, when we're weighing out the fruit and veg, there's often a waste margin that's been calculated, just in case produce comes in at lower quality. And so there's always sort of leftover bits and bobs, and I call them thank you boxes, and we put them all out for the volunteers to help themselves to the thank you boxes of fruit and veg, in part to get it all gone from the room, and in part to also say thank you. We also give them a Christmas present at Christmas. And our physical space, we are in the back room of a community center that's that's an old school that got sold to a community group, and they charge us very low rent. We at this point have 2 freezers, 1 upright, 1 chest freezer, and 2 refrigerators. But we're gaining another freezer and, well, 2 chest freezers and another fridge, because what we have is not quite enough. And it's very busy on the packing day. I started going there on the Thursday to receive the pallet of veg, and I started developing a few volunteers to come help me. And now we do quite a bit of packing on the Thursday, and then on Friday morning, just people keep arriving and they're carrying in boxes and boxes of produce that's to go into everything, into all the customer orders. And so we pack up until lunch, and then after lunch we pack the chilled goods, which are difficult to handle. We can maybe go into the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, this is not a complete list map of how far afield our producers are from where the central Dalry is. Actually, it's not even showing where the hub is, but it's sort of in the middle, the biggest cluster. Yeah, kind of in there. Yeah. So we're spread quite wide. Yes, in the packing, we have cooler bags that we pack chilled goods in. The frozen, all the meat is frozen. We don't handle any fresh meat. We've been unable to find any supplier of sort of good fish. People would really love fish, but the local fish people, they have not very good practices. So we haven't been able to kind of find fresh fish that we could sell frozen. And people, so we pack the chilled stuff after lunch into cooler bags, and then we double check all the orders before they go out the door, which is, we do it in teams. We use the invoice that's in every box, and we double check every order, and that's when we find a lot of the mistakes. So we're pretty good at not messing up people's orders. And yeah, I think one of the other aspects, which, because last year we were a project of Propagate, which is a KIC, a community interest company, and our turnover was beginning to get so high that we became our own community interest company. And that has proven to be a huge amount of work, and we're not totally clear on the benefits yet. In the intervening time, we lost our coordinator, resigned, and it looks like it was partially from stress. I think because turning into our own community interest company, the overheads increased because we had our own, we had to get our own bookkeeping system and our own accountant and our own insurance, and just there's a whole tranche of sort of business expense along with running your own company. So that's definitely something to consider, because it just adds another layer of complexity to running a food hub, I think. If we could have the next slide. I'm trying to remember what's on all of these. Oh yeah, so this is an example of some of the products we buy in to supplement people's orders. We get most of it from Green City Whole Foods, and a fair bit from Organic North, and a tiny bit from Suma Whole Foods. And we buy direct from Source Climate Change Coffee. But on the whole, anything bought in is certified organic. And we are charging pretty much recommended retail price, so we are not more expensive than your local whole food shop. And so these items are doing, they're just sort of steady. They're particularly enjoyed by people out west who don't have even a whole food shop anywhere nearby. But of course, we're up against, you can buy Whole Foods online quite easily, and people do that. maybe the next slide. And I do apologize, this is not a prepared presentation that I did. I'm using slides from a different presentation, and just trying to speak to the Food Hub and what I know of how we work. This is a image of the collection points, although we've got a couple new ones on top of this, I think. And the collection points are mostly in fairly public places like community centers, or sometimes they're just parking outside of a building and the volunteer pulls up with the orders and people meet them, and they're required to wait there for 15 minutes and people collect their orders. We send our drivers out with with the meat in a cooler box, with a lot of ice in it, ice packs, so that it remains frozen. We're acutely aware of, we do a lot of measuring temperatures and recording them, all the environmental health requirements of selling chilled and frozen food. And it's a constant sort of education to our producers to also adhere to those guidelines. Some are better than others. But, for the most part, it's working. Although right now we're in our sales have been down the last couple of months, really. And I'm suspecting for us that we're lacking a certain amount of marketing that our coordinator used to do. And maybe we can look at the next slide if there is. Yeah. Okay, this was produced for funders. We have had funding the whole time we've been in existence. And generally, though, the difficulty with that is a lot of funders don't want to fund staff time or much staff time. They do like kind of, demonstrable either items or, posters from an event you put on. And they're less interested in kind of ongoing wages. So we've failed in the last kind of 3 funding applications, partially also because we became our own community interest company. And apparently the wind farm money locally, they've changed who they'll fund, and kicks are generally part of that framework is that the staff are on the board of directors, and now the local funders don't want to fund organizations that there's any money paid to any directors. So as a group, we need to deal with that, and we might have the staff kind of come off as directors so that we can access some of that funding, because we have quite a few wind farms in development in our local area, and they tend to give a lot of money to local groups. Perhaps we could look at the next. Yeah, so these are some of the events that this is what I came in on helping with when I first was hired to help put on these events, and they were funded, and the coordinator at the time just was swamped and couldn't take the time to organize them, so I jumped in and helped organize, and people really did enjoy them. The feedback was good. The meals were cooked just using organic local produce, and then some of the producers came and spoke at the meal in between courses, and the local film and feast was part of. There's a Glenkins Food Month that's on right now, and we did a film. I think it was actually Rooted, which was done here. And then we made local food. We made the food for it with a local chef and homegrown stuff. And perhaps the next slide. That might. Oh, yep. Okay, so that's me in the middle, and we had to do all these sort of photographs we were in Dumfries and Galloway Life magazine did a spread on us, which ironically did not generate any new customers at all, not a single one. I think we find that marketing seems to be the key, because shopping this way is not a very common way of shopping. The most repeated statement I get. About 30% of our orders are picked up by people locally. And people are always walking in the door going, "Ooh, I forgot what I ordered," because they ordered it a week ago. And they weren't, they just couldn't remember, because we're so used to, as consumers, walking into a store, choosing what you want and buying it right then and there. So I think that is part of the challenge of food hubs is people, there's so much trust built into the system, because customers are buying sight unseen. So you have to maintain good quality, which is hard with producers sometimes. And then when I buy from Organic North, I'm also pre-ordering, because they operate zero waste as well. So I'm buying sight unseen, and I'm trusting Organic North to give good quality, which occasionally they don't, and occasionally their suppliers let them down. So it's there's a lot of trust built in the system, and I think I'm at the moment really trying to work out a way to find out why customers stop buying with us. I know some of it's economic; they can't afford it necessarily. Our order minimum for collection is £5, and our order minimum for collection points is £20. But vegetables are not that expensive, so you can get quite a lot in a box for £20. But still, people are suffering more food poverty these days, I think, than they were even when the food hub started. We're taking part in this might be of interest to Mandy, but there's Better Food Traders, are an organization that supports food hubs, and we're taking part in they've been doing a sort of online training sessions, of which we're one of the food hubs that were allowed to join that, and that's been really helpful. But again, we don't have enough time, enough paid hours to do all the work that we need to do. So you have to prioritize, or you end up working for free, which I think, you can end up doing because you believe in a project, but there's limits, and you have to be a little bit boundaried around that. And yeah, I'd prefer at this point to wait until we have questions, because I think I'll do better answering questions than gabbling on about Galloway Food Hub. Thanks very much.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Gil. It's very impressive to see the amount of customers that you consistently serve in your web of logistics that go into that. Quite amazing. So thank you very much for that. I know there are a couple questions there. I'm sorry, I'm not ignoring everyone. I'm just where we just have one more speaker joining us. Jill, are you there? Yes.
I'm here, yes. Can you possibly co-host me again, because I lost
Of
signal?
course I can, yeah.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Yeah, I'll let Jill introduce herself, but she's just going to talk a little bit about the Open Food Hub that unfortunately isn't running any longer, but we thought it would be nice to give a bit of background to a food hub that was running in Argyll and Bute. So I'll pass over to Jill.
Thank you. Yep, I'm a very small farmer from near Oban, who spent really the last 35 years raising a whole variety of livestock and food for my own consumption and to feed our local community from here in Kintallen Farm in Benderloch. I initially started with plans of fairly significant scale veg, soft fruit with some eggs and sheep. Willie Lowe's was still our local supermarket, and the manager was very keen and still able to source locally. That changed just as I became a custodian of Kintallen in the early 1990s. Tesco was built and a very different supply structure arrived. Added to this, with me requiring a spinal fusion, put paid to any hopes that I had of managing acres of soft fruit and field veg. We had poultry, milking goat herd, Jacob sheep for meat, then later fibre, and breeding and selecting for easy production and quality produce, local sales, and managing the land for sort of ecology and diversity were my key targets. Along with making the best of all the products. And therefore, local sales was always a fundamental part of where I was looking. We sold direct for quite a bit of the time, but there was clearly looking to connect with other people doing the same thing. Then some life changes over the last few decades was different changes in focus and direction. We got really busy on the farm. We had to earn a lot more money. So growing food and veg for ourselves and others slid off the radar. We got busier. We had to earn more. We got started a utility poultry breeding program, selling live birds, farm park attraction, garden centre, small holding supplies, hen houses, mail order, all sorts of stuff in the first decade of the 2000s. And yeah, there was not a local food produce vibe going locally. We changed circumstances again, and we picked up on some of these things, and a much more food focus came back to us. And we ended up being the host of Local Origins Rural Network Community Producers Market. I had been a stallholder at the somewhat ill-fated market in Oban around 2001, which had not been a success, nor a particularly pleasant experience for most of us. But it certainly helped inform what we created with our own markets. The lawn market was a real farmers market, people coming to us twice a month, 10 months of the year, whatever it was, 10 to 4 every day for about 5 years. And being a local market organizer really raised awareness of how much goes on behind the scenes with a variety of food and creative arts businesses. We did have amazing support from our local community. The market became an integral part of the local area for visitors and locals. And people came to be social. They came to change their buying habits, their eating habits. They supported the individuals who grew successful businesses. And we had a lot of community organizations had a large ready audience for related topics of sustainability, creativity, and community. What was hard was the sheer physical labor involved in setting up, taking down stalls. There's somebody here in the audience I spotted who has knows all about that. And we were not able to reliably find ways to outsource that activity. And latterly, my failing health and carer responsibilities meant that things had to slide. We did not do what we maybe should have done, and that is created what other people are talking about of proper charity organisations and having a better paid organiser or setup. That was our weakness. 2015, we held our last market. Actually, the only one we had to close for bad weather. But they were missed. A few years later, Food from Argyll had been on the go for quite a few years by then, but they'd been creating an amazing support network for individual businesses going to events, both locally and nationally. But our council and community really didn't have much of a focus on local food for local consumption in that time. When 2018, Gillian Mackay from Strathblane created the Great British Food Hub as a website for local communities to connect to, just about the same time as Argyll and Bute asked Food from Argyll to look at local farmers' markets again. And it was a good fit. The model was click and collect, something that customers are beginning to get used to from supermarkets. And this had significant benefits, or some benefits, over the standard physical farmers' markets we'd had before. Producers put up the details of what they had to offer. For meat, this was a laborious process because each pack and joint had to be individually added with weight and price. It was easier for those with jars and consistent packs of produce. Consumers chose what they wanted by a certain time and paid for it, all online. The producers, none of us were involved in the organization of the website itself. That was done outside. The producers who made fresh food then had a day and a half between ordering and the hub day to make ordered goods, and the rest of us would pick out what had been ordered, and we all came together at a designated location in Oban, which was rented for a couple of hours. Very simple, very theoretically straightforward. There were only a few extra sales allowed on the day. Some of us who had eggs or something like that, but not a lot. And the financial model was a percentage of the sales would go to Gillian for the website, both her investment and the maintenance, and a percentage went to Food from Argyll as organisers. As they had no one locally, this did involve a lot of travelling to start with. eventually that changed to one of the local producers being the local organizer. Those local organizers were responsible for the marketing, the hall space. They were responsible for making, registering all the local producers. They were involved with authorizing new products on the hub, ensuring the producers got everything there, and that the customers picked up all their all the food. It was only open for a couple of hours. The benefits for us all, there's no waste. And we certainly had significant difference compared to the farmers markets. And the customers could pick out what they wanted in comfort at home and had a set day and time to collect it. The downsides was there were fewer local producers by then, especially for the veg and the baking, which were always really successful. And partly we struggled to get it across to locals, I think, at that time. But yes, it was definitely a new way of doing things for us. And certainly somehow didn't excite people in the same way. The hub organizer was somewhat more clinical, I think. We had the cost of the meeting place. There were also local issues like abattoir-ish problems. The fact that most of the meat had to be frozen, which not all the customers wanted. And producers also had by then had lots of other commitments. The hub organizer did have to work really hard to make every event happen, as well as maintaining the customer base. And this was fine while they were paid independently by Food from Argyll. And certainly when the local producer, who was selling a good quantity of her own meat, and she did an amazing job for a really long time, especially through COVID, which did give the hub a significant boost for a while. Part of it, I think, for locally is that the market at Benderloch we had was very much supported by the local rural community, and was very much an event. People came to meet up. They came to eat. We did a lot of cooking. The shopping was an experience. The really highly successful market at Tobermory emulates that, and is one of the models I can really see happening in our local area with some adaptations. If one person could be paid as a market organizer who booked the 4 main halls, for instance, Tynalt, Appin, Seal, Benderloch in rotation, with one of the little minor halls doing the occasional 5th week, producers could choose whether they're attending one, all, some. Customers could travel. Our local rural communities travel better than Open does. And that has been the case pretty much right the way through from the very, very beginning market. At Tobermory, they're 12 till 2, really allows producers to do all the family stuff, do all the farm stuff, do all the growing, picking and what have you, or even, making in that morning. It becomes a 1-day, not a 2-day event, as the other markets were. And they can do family and they can do other work even, as well as providing lunch and an opportunity for community groups to engage, which we found really, that was a really good vibe about that. And it could be more viable for new starts, new businesses starting up, need more than 1 day a week, 1 day a month. They need more of it, more produce being sold. It makes much more viable for to grow sales up, especially if the perishables where you do need to be selling regularly. And there's no logic to why Oban has never been as good at this. We've had individuals since establishing really successful businesses like Karen's Alba seafood shop and her countrywide market attendances. I mean, she was one of the lawn market babies. She started all that smokefish thing with the lawn market. Forestfield and Glen, Gilbert, Saucher Bakery, Heritage Bakehouse, hi Tracy, the pizza vans and individual farmers. We're even getting some veg boxes beginning to grow. Mandy has done an amazing job recently in establishing the monthly farmers and crafters markets in the last year. Hopefully that will inspire new producers to bring more food, because again, she's struggling. It's mostly crafts. We can grow food here. At one point, I had 12 different meats in my freezer, all home produced. Learning more about regenerative land management and permaculture in recent years has taught me we can be so much more productive than we are currently. But because of our climate and our soils, if once we really start making that changes to our microclimate and our biodiversity, we do need better community logistics. I've long said we would love to see a mobile slaughterhouse facility in each of our towns, with all the associated chill and freezer storage, butchery, shared catering facilities for small businesses to timeshare, so people aren't creating, investing huge amounts in everything each person. The bakers can get there in there for early. The jam makers can follow. The ready meal chefs, charcuterie preservers, or whatever. We can have composting facilities for the waste. Creative artists to deal with all the associated materials, and then shops to get it out of there. In Oban, livestock centre would be perfect. But it's very much we've got to look at it again locally and see how to engage the local community. Looking at what Dumfries and Galloway and Moray and Lochaber have done over the years has always been inspiring. And it's just lovely to see these things happening. And can I just say thank you to Brenna and Kate for all you're beginning to do here in Argyll, because I know how hard it is. So thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. No, that's great. Thank you so much. I don't mean to cut you off there, Jill. I just thought I may give an opportunity the last 10 minutes or so just to ask any questions that anyone had. Sorry, I'm just aware of the time there, but thank you so much, Jill. That was fantastic. And hopefully we can see a resurgence of one in Oban. I'd love to see that. I'll open the floor to any questions. I know there's a couple in the chat there, but I did see that Mandy answered those there. So just if anyone wants to speak or raise your hand, whatever, or put it in the chat, whatever you like, for any one of our speakers.
Can I ask one of the others? How do you find you engage with the locals? What are your best marketing techniques to inspire them to get involved?
Well, we've in terms of shopping or volunteering?
Both.
Both, yeah. Okay. Well, I think we had. I think when we do apply for funding, we always put in some marketing. And so we've done different things like postcards. Apparently they did a flyer drop into all the very local communities' doors, which generated absolutely zero. We do Facebook Meta, so Instagram and Facebook posting. And we use MailChimp to do regular mail outs. Like we have a standard email that lets people know when we open, and then we don't bombard them, but the one tells them we're open, and then we drop one 24 hours before we close saying only 24 hours left, to shop at the food hub. Our biggest problem is people have to sign up to receive the emails, and I believe we've got quite a gap of people who haven't clicked the button. I don't think it's prominent enough on our website, and so people, if they don't get the reminder, we just disappear off the whatever for them. We've had an idea, and we're probably going to do it next year, of, I don't know what Argyll does, but Dumfries and Galloway, they do like a bin calendar so that people know which bin to put out on which day. And we've done a food hub calendar that shows the order days and then the pickup delivery days. And we want to do one that's actually a paper copy and attach it to people's invoices and send them out next year so that people can pin it up on their fridge and they know when the days are. We ran a competition. We've had funding twice for a food access for poverty, and we did free food boxes. People just had to contact us, and it was all kind of quite discreet, and they got a food box from us. That was good. And we ran a competition on Instagram of winning a free food basket, and we got 300 email addresses from that. Lots of people entered. So there's just various ways, I think, to engage. We were present at different like events. We have we take a banner and do a table full of the products that we carry that are sort of ambient, and some vegetables if we could get them. And but it all takes quite a lot of time and effort, and it needs a certain amount of funding. But when you do activities like that, it's quite easy to record them and then demonstrate, an outcome to funders. Like we got, 200 new email addresses, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of ways. It just depends what your customer base engages with. And a lot of that these days seems to be digital.
Yeah, Mandy, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, just to say, our experience is very similar, I think, to Gail's. We use social media a lot, Instagram and Facebook. We've tried, there's a local sort of little newspaper thing that gets delivered to every household in Lochaber, which you have to pay to have anything in. And we found that sort of thing is a complete waste of time and money. It doesn't produce anything. We've got 4 really good community newsletters throughout Lochaber. So we try and keep articles going in those. But mostly our problem is getting enough producers. It's not because our rationale, which is set by LEG's directors, is our focus is on promoting local food production. It's not about particularly expanding people's consumption of organic food, generally. So our problem is getting more producers. And we'd have no problem having more customers if we could get the producers. I think word of mouth too actually is hugely important. There is a sense of community within Food Lochaber customers, which there must be, I'm sure, with your Galloway customers as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, both. Kate, did you have something? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It was great to hear from both of you, and it's really interesting to see how these kind of new models of doing things and how you're kind of finding your way and trying out different things. And I was wondering, you were talking, both of you said that you received funding in some way, so it needs to be subsidized at the moment. And I was wondering, do you see a future where it can be self-sustaining, or is it just a necessary thing that it has some kind of community wider investment into it? What do you think?
I would say, like in my head, I seem to rationalize funding as supporting the community engagement side of everything and the eco impact, that we are trying to be zero waste, and we're managing it, and we do tons of recycling and all that. And food retail is so poorly paid, and I think to attract the skill set needed to run an online shop, you need to pay reasonable wages, and you won't attract people with those skills for like very part-time jobs at very poor pay. It's I think, because I've been in retail so long, and I think, we did crunched the numbers to see what we would need to do to break even, because on our own, and it's not unachievable. Like, there are other food hubs in England who easily do, but they are closer to much larger population centers, like much larger, and they're closer to bigger producers, big farms that produce volume. And again, I think that can be a challenge, because any sparsely populated rural area, everybody's spread out, both your consumers and your producers. So there is funding out there for supporting local food and local production and local economies. It's just kind of finding the right funders and then managing to fulfill what you've asked for and all that. I'm a bit new to the third sector funding stuff, so I'm not an expert, but I'm learning quickly.
Great, thanks, Gail.
I think I'm slightly depressed to hear what you're saying, Gail, because we've always assumed that if we could only scale up a bit, we could cover our costs, including wages. And from what you're saying, it seems that doesn't happen. The scale of the challenge just grows with the scale of the operation. I think one of the big challenges at the moment is because a lot of the funders, quite rightly, their focus is changing. Well, no, I say quite rightly. It's not quite rightly that it's moving away from environmental issues, but it is quite rightly in terms of moving towards food poverty issues. And, selling organic food from a few local producers to a few fairly well-heeled customers, it's really hard to present that in a way that will meet the criteria of lots of funders. What else to say? Yeah, I think it's a struggle. It's a struggle.
I think we found very much that people, with the market, people changed their buying habits. So I think we have to be cautious that we don't allow the funders to do local food or food poverty, that we should have both, because people will change how they spend. So they may not necessarily have a lot of money, but they will, when they engage with local food, they change how they spend. And they don't need to spend so much because the food is more nutritious. Then there's less waste. They're more conscious of what they're eating. They're eating from scratch. There are different decision-making processes that go in when they engage with local food. So it would be good that we don't lose local food support, whilst obviously we have to support food poverty. I think they should be separate issues.
We partner with our local, it's a membership food bank basically, but it's a membership one. And so on our website, people can click to donate. And the one thing that they don't get donated from all the big supermarkets is eggs. So we regularly supply trays of eggs to our local food larder. And they're good organic eggs. And interestingly, in this bit of the world, at least, the food larder, they get donated so much food from the 3 supermarkets in Castle Douglas that they give a lot away. And I've gone in there and she holds up a whole box of aubergines and says, would your volunteers want this? And it's because a lot of people who use their larder don't cook. So they have ingredients that they get donated, and they know they can't get shot of them to people. So it's food poverty isn't just about the food, it's about people having money to pay for the electricity and stuff. But we try and partner with a lot of different other community groups and community gardens and larders and things like that, because the more we join up with other people kind of trying to improve the food landscape, the better. I think there's more strength in those numbers of people.
And you certainly seem to have a lot of them. I mean, you're saying everything in plurals, Whereas, in Argyll, we'd be struggling now to do these in singulars. There are so many fewer. There are some community groups, but there are far distance apart, so they're barely able to connect together.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. You're a very rural community. Somehow we end up with sort of centres, and that have never really communicated much in the same way. I know a few people in Dumfries and Galloway in the regen food side of it, and it's mind blowing what you're all achieving.
I should say that Lochaber Environmental Group do a lot of work as well with food waste composting and lots of wider sort of food related issues that Food Lochaber itself isn't at the moment doing. And also we have a really successful sort of supermarket waste food system locally, which I'm involved in as a volunteer. And we take in like tons of food every night. We have collections from 3 or 4 supermarkets, and it all gets redistributed. So I guess part of the reason why Food Lochaber itself is so small is that other things are happening in our area. We have a fairly small focus.
Looks like we've got. Oh yeah, Brenna.
No, don't worry. I know we're a bit past 8, but if you guys are okay to stay on, read a couple more questions, is that all right? Yeah, okay. I think Beck, you had your hand up first there.
Just want to check. Can you hear me through my headphones?
Yes.
Yeah, you're a bit faint, but yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll come closer to the microphone. Well, that looks really weird. Sorry. Having headphone problems this evening. Thank you very much for several really, really interesting talks. I've learned loads, and I just wanted to say I'm running a meeting tomorrow, which is about feeding back to funders the challenges that we have in rural areas for organisations who are supporting communities with poverty. And obviously food comes into this in a number of ways. I'm really delighted, not delighted is the wrong word, but there's been several really important points in the food side of things, which I will try and make sure they make their way into the discussions tomorrow. But it would be great to be in touch with all or any of you as we progress with that work, partly because we work with the Citizens Panel who are really interested in food issues. And yeah, it'd be wonderful to have one or more of you speak to the group about the amazing work that you do. And I think you make so many really important points about the way the whole system has to set up, and not just no individual part of it can work on its own. Thank you for a really good session.
Thanks, Becky. I think after we'll send out, if everyone's happy, I'll send out contact details and along with the recording of this session probably tomorrow, so everyone can stay in touch if there's any questions to ask directly. I can put everyone in touch if that's all good. And Angela.
So yeah, I'm just going to pitch in with a wee bit of ask for people to lobby. So one of the big problems in Argyll is lack of abattoirs. I'm in Hellsborough, Lomond, so our local abattoir is Paisley, which is fine. But the other thing that's a problem for producing food, and I'm really, really worried about food sustainability in the long term, and also with the changing climate, that the land that's pretty fallow just now in Argyll might actually become prime land, but quite a lot of it's given over to offsetting just now. So if people could help me lobby, I've been lobbying over the last few years to say if land has been given over to, for instance, to agroforestry or whatever, that kind of stuff, that we should try and have a small amount of it set aside for local food growing. So, for every X amount of forests, 2 football pitches worth of just food space for food growing. Because at some point our supply lines are going to be in peril. And also you're not going to get any Valencia oranges this year or there's all sorts of crops all over the country not being able to grow. And I think it's really important that we actually have self-sustainable food as well as being able to market stuff.
Absolutely.
So I just think the more people that can lobby to save land for growing food,
We've got to get people to take it on as well, because Forestry Commission have been saying that they would provide land for local communities, as and they did it up at Fort William, but nobody's organised themselves to take it on. And it is that thing of we have to do it for ourselves as well.
Yeah,
and that actually hasn't happened in some, in some, people have said, oh, we want this, but they want someone else to organise it.
So, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing with all this kind of food market things. It is actually trying to grow a movement. To be honest, it is a systems change, isn't it? Yeah. The more you talk about it, the more chance there is of something. Something to.
And interestingly, as I was saying earlier, we're going to be. I'm currently arranging with Clem Sanderson from the Land Workers Alliance to come along and do a workshop with us, probably date in November, and they campaign around food sovereignty, land justice and agroecology, and they're supporting members to in a sort of grassroots movement to take more ownership of the land where that's possible. So she's going to be running a workshop with us about that. So that kind of speaks to what you're saying as well. Obviously, we'll let you know exactly when that is, but it's looking like mid-November at some point. So it would be great to see people there. I think she'll have a lot to offer us in this conversation.
There's also lobbying going on. Really, it's probably not going to happen, but trying to get subsidies for market gardeners, subsidies for small-scale horticulture, because people can't make a living doing market gardening. It's so impossible to, and some really big market gardens have gone out of business, organic ones in Scotland in the last couple of years, and it's depressing because it's a lot of work for sometimes not even a living wage. So it's there's lots of different avenues, because like we there's an agroecological farm here that actually needs people, and it's not quite happening. The people are not, for some reason, being attracted to coming and working this land that's available. So I think the act of growing food it's quite specific for people who've just been accustomed to going and buying it in a shop. It's quite a big leap.
Absolutely. And just sort of building on that, there is some of you might have heard of the Get Growing Scotland, and they offer a help at advisory service. If there's anyone that knows a bit of land or just wants to know where to start about having access to land to grow on, I'll put their info in the chat there. They're really great and can sort of offer one-on-one support of how to get started and sort of guide you in the process and be a bit of a sounding board as well. So as Kate said, we're hoping to do a couple more webinars in the future around land access and land for growing. So watch this space, I suppose. But thank you. Thank you all so much. I know we've got a bit over time there, so thank you for staying with us past that. Big thank you to our wonderful speakers for joining us this evening. Really, really appreciate your time and hearing all about your food hubs, and hopefully can stir on some further conversations for ones in Argyll and Bute. And if anyone wants to keep the conversation going, please get in touch with myself or Kate. I will send around contact details for all of our speakers, as well as the recording for this session, probably tomorrow. So thank you all so much for spending your Monday evening with us. Really appreciate it. And hopefully be in touch soon.
Thank you.